welcome back. MPs have been returning to Westminster today after the Easter break, and tonight they're joined by our very own Adrian. Adrian, what are you doing there? You trying to get a good view of the coronation?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is the most historic landmark location in our constitutional history, for better or for worse, depending on the point of view. We're in Westminster Hall, which is part of the Palace of Westminster, and there's a reason for that. I know one of the things that we always try to do is reflect the views of our MPs in whichever way we can, but we're trying to step it up a gear and actually come to here at this point at least once a month and hear from them in debate and discussion. So that's the plan. That's why we're here at Westminster Hall.
There we are. So we're going to see more of this section over the coming months. What is the mood in Westminster then? How's everyone feeling?
Well, it's the start of term, so people are either missing their Easter holidays or they're very eager and excited to get back. But I think there's two sort of dynamics. One it's been a certain, you could call it calming down from all the upheaval or chaos even that we've seen over the last few years. That's definitely gone away. But at the same time, there's another dynamic, which is that we're really on the countdown to the next UK general election. And that's exactly the point I'm going to start at with my guests who are here tonight. And they are James Davies, the Conservative Wales Office Minister, Alex Davies-Jones for Labour, and Hywel Williams for Plaid Cymru. Thank you all for joining us here in Westminster Hall. James Davies, you've got a hotline to number 10. October 2024, is that the time of the next general election?
Well, I believe it needs to be held by January 2025, and you know as much as I do, but there has been speculation that it could be next year.
And you can't then add any insider information to that and say...
I'm afraid not.
Okay. Which would you prefer, an early or a late election? Does it make any difference one way or another?
Well, I don't think that we need to drag it out any longer than is necessary. The point is that Rishi Sunak needs to be able to deliver on his 5 pledges, and people need to be able to see that that's the case. We need to turn the corner with this terrible time we've had since the pandemic and the cost of living crisis.
Alex Davies-Jones, October 2024, is that the ideal time for a general election as far as you're concerned?
The ideal time, Adrian, would be tomorrow. I'd love a general election tomorrow. Yes, please.
Now,
yes.
I love general elections, but I don't know if tomorrow is a good time.
Well, no, I want one sooner rather than later, as soon as possible. We are now on our second Prime Minister that the public didn't get a chance to elect. We need to have a vote as soon as possible. The people out there are crying for a vote. We've seen unprecedented times over the past few years. So many manifesto promises broken. It's time to go to the polls.
There's no constitutional reason for that, is there, in this, whether you like it or not? But Gordon Brown famously didn't have a general election, neither did Jim Callaghan.
No, but we desperately need a general election. The public is crying out for change. That's what I'm hearing on the doorsteps, and I would love one sooner rather than later.
Hywel Williams, is Plaid Cymru all for an early general election?
I think there's a question of basic credibility here. This is the third Prime Minister since the 2019 election. So I think whoever's the next Prime Minister needs to establish his credentials, or we shall see when the election comes. But you know, there is the John Major problem. If he hangs on until January 2025, he then has no choice whatsoever but to go. And John Major found that to his cost.
Could do, yes. Also, John Major in 1992 famously won the UK general election, didn't he? So Rishi Sunak could do that.
Yeah, there's always a bit of velocity, and Labour has a much higher hill to climb than people think, I think.
We'll be coming back to that with Alex Davies-Jones in a moment. I want to say, I mean, it's pretty much every story now, news story, is seen through the prism of the possible UK election. None more than today's big story about Rishi Sunak being looked at, investigated by the Standards Commissioner. James Davies, what do you think? Is that a reasonable thing to do, or is it an embarrassment?
Well, of course, this relates to the Prime Minister's wife and her minority share ownership in a childcare company. I've been assured that the Prime Minister did register his interest through the normal route as a minister via the Cabinet Office, and I know he'll be very happy to discuss with the Commissioner for Standards.
I mean, the Register of Ministerial Interest hasn't been published for a year, has it? I mean, it's not transparent, is it?
I believe it is due to be published in the very near future.
OK. Alex Davies-Jones, there you go. There's your answer.
Very near future. Over a year, as you said, Neely. This is not the transparency, openness, accountability, integrity that we were promised by the Prime Minister when he was appointed Prime Minister on the steps of Downing Downing Street. This speaks to the need for honesty in politicians, which the public are crying out for.
Or it's a simple administrative mistake. Your own leader last year had to apologise to the Standards Commissioner for similar mistakes.
Well, let's see that ministerial interest. We're calling on the Prime Minister to publish that as soon as possible before the elections next month. Where is it? Let's have it.
James Davis, you
I
wanted
think
to
it's
come in
also
there?
important to mention that the Prime Minister did write to the Liaison Committee, I believe, on the 4th of April to emphasise the registration that he'd made.
He didn't answer when he was in front of the Liaison Committee, though, did he? And that's the problem.
Well, I think he made it clear that he had done what he felt was necessary.
Hal Williams, you wanted to come in there as well?
Well, it's one thing after another, isn't it? Whoever's the Prime Minister in 10 Downing Street at present, there are questions about integrity. I think we've seen it with the previous one and the one before that as well.
And
people do want, they want to clear out, actually.
I have to bring this up. I know it's not this Parliament; it's the Scottish Parliament. Plaid Cymru treats the SNP as a sister party, and well, I don't need to rehearse the problems that the SNP is going through at the moment. There's an integrity problem everywhere, isn't there?
Well, there are things going on in Scotland which are being amplified by the unionist press in Scotland and jumped on with glee by the Tory press here. They want to
Aren't you diminishing the seriousness of some
Well,
of those?
let's see what the police investigation comes up with, and let's see what the other investigations there as far as the SNP's accounts are concerned. Let's see what they bring forward. I mean, I think the SNP are quite happy to see that happening, and we shall see where we go from there.
Okay, talking of criticism of election strategies. I know already you're going to correct me because you already have. Labour's attack ads. Criticism of the Prime Minister playing the man, not the game. Big mistake?
No, I think we make no apology for highlighting what is a serious issue and a failure here of 13 years of failure in terms of our justice system, our public services. It is about time that the public saw exactly what is going on.
You said you were going to be different.
Well, you need to hold the Prime Minister accountable for his actions, both when he was serving in government, in his cabinet, and now in his role in Prime Minister, and we make absolutely no apology for that.
How is it different from what your party criticised Boris Johnson for doing to Keir Starmer?
This is about showing the public exactly what this party have been doing to our country for the last 13 years. As you mentioned, we need a general election, we want change, and I make no apologies for highlighting the failures of this government.
James Davis, your party has done this before. I could go way back and think about the demonise advert of Tony Blair, and there is this. What Peter Mandelson said today, that there are conservative criticisms, if you like, or attacks coming from the right-leaning newspapers. It's something that your party has done, isn't it?
Well, I think it all comes down to reasonableness, and actually the feedback I've had locally is people don't like negative campaigning by and large, and they don't like what they've seen from the Labour Party. And we've also seen Labour figures such as Lord Blunkett say that that's what they believe too.
So, do you think your party should take the moral high
ground? By and large, all parties should try to rise above that kind of behaviour.
Rather brutally, doesn't it work, though? Because a poll found that 17% feel less favourable towards the Conservatives now as a result of those adverts.
Well, I'd seen a poll that showed otherwise, actually, that people didn't think the adverts were working, and so I think Labour should reflect on them.
And Alex Davis-Jones, that same poll opinion said that those adverts made 12% of people feel less favourable towards Labour, so they're backfiring.
Look, the only poll that matters is the poll on election day. This is the poll that matters to the people, and as I said, we need to highlight the failure of this Tory government, and that's what we've been doing.
Howell Williams, I realise this is primarily a two-party fight that's going on there, but I do want to get your take on, maybe not just attack ads, but going personal and being negative.
Well, I think Michelle Obama had the last word on this. She said, when they go low, you go high, and we go high. And I think that's the way to deal with it.
Is that always possible, though?
Not always possible. As you know full well, the research shows about a third of campaigning in the United States is very, very negative. And that seems to work to some extent. But I think it should be avoided at all costs.
And what about that point that Alex Davis-Jones was making, which is that she wants to make, or the party wants to make those negative points about the Conservatives?
Yeah. I think you can do it about both large parties, actually, by looking at policy without attaching it to individuals and their culpability or not.
Well then, do you think really that the next UK general election is going to be fought and won or lost on cost of living?
Well, cost of living, but also the integrity issue obviously does intrude. That's going to include, as well as the tiredness of this government after 13 years. I think people just want to change as well.
Okay, but it's not just good enough to have a change, is it? There's got to be a positive reason for
Sure.
change.
And we'll be examining the prospectus of both large parties, but I think Plaid will have something to say as well.
I'm sure you will. Well, both large parties. In terms of the cost of living and the focus of the UK general election, people will want to know what Labour is going to offer as an alternative and what the Conservatives have been doing. So let's try and get some idea of what the messages are from both of you. James Davis, when people say this is one of the worst cost of living crises I've ever known, the prices are terrible, you've been in charge for 13 years here, it's all down to you.
Well, I think there are clearly world circumstances, aren't there? There's been a pandemic and then there's been a war in Ukraine, and that's had its consequences across the globe, and this government has done a great deal to help people out, not least paying for half of the energy bills over the winter just gone.
I think that's a fair point to make, the various schemes that you've done. But you have been in charge for 13 years, I'll say again, and the economy is not in a sound way, is it?
Well, as I say, the economy has taken a negative impact from what's gone on in very recent times that were out of the control, factors out of the control of the government. I think most people realise that.
That's not true.
Why is it not true then?
Because factors outside of the control of this government elected Liz Truss to be Prime Minister. That's the reason why mortgage prices have increased for people in Pontypridd, across Wales and across the UK. It's nothing to do with outside factors. It was the Conservatives that crashed the economy. Let's be real here.
Surely you are not saying that the war in Ukraine and the global crisis, not easy to say, haven't had an influence.
Of course not. It's had an influence. But look at the other countries around the world, the G7. We've got the lowest predicted growth compared to all of them. That's not by any accident. That's because of political choices made here in Westminster affecting pockets back home in Wales.
James Davis?
Yeah, I think we see all sorts of predictions, but time and time again, actually, the end figures turn out better. So let's see.
And Howell Williams, your take on this? Again, I mean, it's the two parties are attacking each other's record. In fact, Conservatives going way back to the Blair and Brown years. But what do you see who do you see as being to blame?
Well, indeed, but can I say this? A third of Welsh children are living in poverty. I'll say that again. A third of Welsh children are living in poverty. Now, talking about Ukraine or prices or oil prices or whatever is irrelevant to them. We need economic policies, we need education policies which actually attack the poverty that we face in Wales, along with a lot of other matters as well.
And I want to put one point to Alex Davies-Jones, which I'm sure you will hear a lot in the election campaign, which is that Labour has been in charge in Wales for 25 years. I know that when a general election happens, it'll be for this place, but Labour policies have been in running Wales, if you like, for a quarter of a century.
And I'm extremely proud of what we've announced today in terms of increasing EMA,
lowest
social
wages
mobility.
And economic performance way down.
We've been battling against a Conservative government for 13 years here in Westminster. Imagine what we could do hand in hand with Labour in Wales and Labour in Westminster. That's what I'm working to achieve. And we are trying to implement some radical policies, some brilliant policies to help businesses in Wales, to help the people of Wales. But it needs to work both ways. We need to have that hand-in-glove support here with Westminster.
Okay, hand-in-glove support. Will the Conservatives offer that, or will you continue having a sort of Cold War with the Welsh Government?
Well, I think it's about cooperating where we can do, such as on free ports. That's great. But actually what we see in terms of the record of the Welsh Government over 25 years is really very, very poor outcomes for the health service and education, for instance. So I think Labour needs to pull up its socks.
Okay, well, I'm not going to give you a right to reply on that because we haven't got much time, but I do want to talk about the national park formerly known as Brecon Beacons. James Davis, good idea, bad idea? The Welsh Conservatives in the Senate think it's a bad idea.
Banau Brycheiniog, yes. Well, I can understand the sentiment in terms of not wanting to celebrate fires on hills, but I do also think it's worth bearing in mind that the Brecon Beacons, like Snowdonia, are internationally known under those titles.
Still will be, though, won't they?
They still can be, and that's the important thing, that it is a bilingual recognition.
I mean, it worked for Uluru, and there are national parks in America. Even Yellowstone is getting its name changed, isn't it?
Right.
People will still find their way.
Of course they will, but I think we need to consider how to best promote Wales in this country and abroad, and marketing is really important.
Alex Davis-Jones, you're welcome.
I welcome it wholeheartedly. I think it's a brilliant idea in terms of the attention and recognition it's giving to our national park today. Look at the amount of people who will now see Banau Brycheiniog, want to come and visit sustainably, want to come visit responsibly, and talk about all the things that, apart from the plan in terms of climate change, sustainability, I think it's a wonderful thing, and I'm excited for my next visit.
Will it cause confusion? Will it not?
People will always call it the Brecon Beacons, and people will call it Banau Brycheiniog. It's what they've always been called. You know, a rose by any other name would smell just as sweet, you know, as the famous poet once said. So I'm thrilled about it. It's fine.
I would be amazed, Howell Williams, if you were opposed to this idea. So,
Well, you know, Banau Brycheiniog is the historic name, and Banau means peaks or hills, and there is a superabundance of peaks there. I don't think I've ever seen a beacon on any one of them, actually.
well, that's a point, isn't it? Yeah, I often wondered where the beacons were. But what about, more seriously, what about the point that it might knock tourism, because certainly for a while people get used to it?
I think what we need in Wales is a unique offer, and you know, our geography, our landscape and our culture is our unique offer, and this is part of it.
Okay, well, thank you all very much for joining me here in Westminster Hall for the first of our hopefully regular panels here at Westminster. James Davis, Alex Davis-Jones and Howell Williams, thank you very much. Rob, I hope you found that illuminating and enlightening. But from here in Westminster Hall, back to you in Cardiff.
It felt like a historic moment in a historic building, Adrian. Thank you to you and guests.